Reading this gospel lesson from Mark is really amazing to me, and I'll tell you why. I had a different message in preparation for this morning, and it was a message on healing. It drew not from this passage, from another gospel passage where Jesus engaged in such a practice. And I was well on my way in preparation for the message before the events that have been unfolding in Charleston, South Carolina. And for the past 11 days, I became increasingly aware of not really being able to concentrate on what I thought would be a pretty good message to bring to you and for me to hear as well, as I spoke about healing. Finally, when I witnessed that incredible event, I'm sure many of you saw it as well, or a review of it, when some surviving members of the 9 families whose dearly beloved had been just stricken down in such a violent moment were allowed to speak, not to be seen, to speak to the alleged gunner. I watched that. How many of you saw that or a replay of it? Not all, but many of you did. Well, it sealed for me any question about whether or not the message needed to be altered for this morning. As these family members confronted the alleged gunman, stricken with their unspeakable grief, overwhelmed by the experience which had come to them so utterly unexpected, unannounced, and for which they were such totally unprepared. An experience that came to them like a thief in the night, robbing them of what they never could again have in the flesh. These were the words spoken by these family members of the murder on that night in a Bible study in the AME Church in South Carolina. These were their words. They spoke words of forgiveness. Words of forgiveness. Without exception, these were their words. They embodied courage and a believing spirit which obviously inhabited each one of the family members of these 9 who had been slain, their loved ones. And as I listened and watched and witnessed, without any question, the beckoning came to me to change what I had planned on sharing with you today. And yet, by God's grace, we read a story of healing. Let that stand in its own merit. I came to realize that I had very little sense of the real meaning of forgiveness. I forgive you, they said to this one whom they could see on the video, and he could hear even though he could not see them. I forgive you. I forgive you for what you have done to me and to my family. I am angry, and I forgive you. I think in those words, and I'll say more about this a bit later, is the validation of their true forgiveness. I am angry and I forgive you. I quote the words of just one of the family members. Speaking at that video monitor, she said, "You took something very precious from me." Speaking to the alleged gunman. "You took something very precious from me," said Nadina Collier, daughter of the 70-year-old Ethel Lance, who was slain. "You took something very precious away from me, and I forgive you." I came to realize how little I really understand about forgiveness. And so, in a sense, I went back to the drawing board. And what I share with you is where I am on that journey of discovery, which I don't think is near complete. I hope not. But these are some things that have come to me and lead to the theme, which is in the bulletin, discovering forgiveness. Somewhere in my past, I came across a statement about forgiveness, and I invite you to listen carefully to these words. By the way, can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. I don't think I'm wired for sound, and that's fine as long as you can hear me. But if you can't, flag me down, especially with these next words I want to speak. Listen carefully. Forgiveness requires, it's not optional, it's not an elective. Forgiveness requires that we let go of all hope, but it doesn't stop there. Forgiveness requires that we let go of all hope that our past will ever be different. Yeah, me too, Kathy. And when I heard that, I mean, on one level, we can say, well, of course, that's obvious. We can't change our past. But something about the language used in that statement wouldn't let go of me. Forgiveness requires that we let go of all hope that the past will ever be different. In the mountain country of West Virginia, there's a tradition which I love. When two people who know each other meet on the street in their village or town, they might greet each other something like this. "Hi, Bill, what you working?" Or "Hi, Mary, what you working?" And Bill or Mary would perhaps respond briefly and then reply with, "And you, Jim, what are you working? What's working you? What's you working? What's working you?" Well, the words of that understanding of the meaning of forgiveness have been working me a long time. I'll say it again. Forgiveness requires that you give up all hope that the past will ever be different. Or let go. I think that's the actual line. Requires that you let go of all hope that the past will ever be different. How easy it is, isn't it? I'll speak for myself. If it's true for you, then join me. How easy it is for me to get caught up in that view of life, that context in which I see life through the rearview mirror. You ever catch yourself looking through the rearview mirror? Someone once said, it's no coincidence that the windshield is this big and the rearview mirror is just this big. And yet, I catch myself looking through the rearview mirror at times and getting all caught up in the language of coulda, woulda, shoulda. Remember that language at all? The if-onlys, the what-ifs. This is the language of regret, I think. The vocabulary of regret. And I think it contains a crying out for forgiveness. Perhaps self-forgiveness. Perhaps forgiveness with another. But it's about longing for that place where I can let go of all hope that my past will ever be different. I work very part-time at Pathways, the Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center here in Annapolis. I was doing a group, which is most of what I do there, with a group of patients one day, some time ago. And somehow we began moving in the direction of the languaging of regret, the if-onlys, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, which is so understandable in each of our lives, and certainly in those folks' lives as well. And I thought about this quote. So I shared it with them. I said, folks, let's think together about something. Because I hear you're struggling with looking through that rear view mirror and not liking what you see there. And I shared the quote, forgiveness requires that we let go of all hope that our past will ever be different. And my initial take on it was, at first, of course, I can't change my past. But also like the follow-up, like I saw you scratching your head, trying to get more deeply into those words. They wrestled with that, wanting to understand what it really meant to let go of all hope that my past will ever be different, and the liberation, the healing, if you will, that could come through that. Well, as the conversation was going on, I saw the countenance of one young lady begin to change. Having worked with her enough that I knew her name and could speak to her personally, I said, what's going on? Or Jane, wasn't her name. Jane, what's going on? What's stirring in you? And this is what Jane said. She said, well, you know, as we're talking about this, I'm realizing I am writing my life story. I am writing my life story even right now as we sit together in this room, in this place. This is my autobiography, which I'm writing. And I'm writing it in indelible ink. There's no going back, she said. There's no erasing. There's no changing my life story as it is written up until now. And others began to shift also in their thinking. And so we talked about that a bit more as a group. And then an older gentleman in the group also, I could see something going on inside him. Kind of like, you know, a comic strip where the light bulb goes on over one's head and it's an indication that some insight has come. Well, I could see that light bulb over the head of this older gentleman. And I will call him Paul. That wasn't his name, but I said, Paul, what's stirring you right now? Well, he said, I've been thinking about what Mary had said regarding writing, not being able to rewrite my history or erase any of the chapters of my autobiography. But he said, something's occurring to me as we're talking right now. He said, we, and he looked around at this small group gathered in the room there, we right now are writing tomorrow's history. When I wake up in the morning, I can remember this conversation, but I can't change it then. Then it's history. Right now, we are writing tomorrow's history. It's not indelible until we've written it. The phrase I like to use is, oh, wow. And there was an, oh, wow, kind of response to the group from what Paul had said. I just asked them, I said, what's that like? What do you feel? What do you experience hearing these two observations? And they said, well, I'm beginning to feel a little bit of hope. I can't change what I've written, but I'm writing tomorrow's history right now. And I can find some hope in that. That's about forgiveness, I think. That's about forgiveness, especially beginning with why, where forgiveness must begin, right here at home. So, the grieving families being referred to now in the media as the Emmanuel Nine. Mother Emmanuel AME Church was the name of the church. And the awful truth which they were encountering, about which they could change nothing. All they could do was, with the strength and courage both within themselves and within their own community of faith, live through the nightmare with no choice about that. But as I reflect now back on that scene, speaking to this young man, the alleged gunman, I don't know that they would have put it this way, but I hear them writing their tomorrow's history with words of forgiveness, of truth, yes, honesty and acknowledgement. I'm angry. One young man said, I'm angry, and I forgive you. And as I said earlier, that's the authentication, I think, of real forgiveness, when it's not denying any of the other things that are part there also. So the first dimension of forgiveness is that it's work. It's work. It's hard work at times. I can't imagine the work being done and being done by these family members in Charleston, South Carolina. It's hard work. The work of forgiveness for each of us is hard work. Letting go of all hope that the past will ever be different. Secondly, and somewhat more briefly, but one of the dimensions of forgiveness I want to just mention briefly is forgiveness involves practice. Ever think about the practice of forgiveness? And how I'm asking myself the same question, how I go about practicing forgiveness? There's a wonderful verse in Matthew featuring a brief conversation between Peter and Jesus. You know, Peter was the impulsive one, the one who would speak now and think later, the one who often would say, oh, ready, fire, aim. But he had his own unique and special place in that inner circle. Just one verse, two verses actually, from Matthew chapter 18. Then Peter came and said to Jesus, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often shall I forgive him or her? As many as 7 times? 7 times. We know in spiritual tradition, in many spiritual traditions, the number 7 is the idea of completeness, not perfection, but completeness. On the 7th day, we're told God rested. 7 is the number for completion. Shall I forgive this person 7 times? And Jesus in reply said, no, Peter, not 7 times. 70 times 7 times. And I think that really translates into as long as you can keep counting. There's no end to developing the practice of forgiveness. So let's just pause for a moment as we wrap up here. Would you care to join me in a very brief, knee-jerk kind of self-inventory? Look over the landscape of your life currently. I'm not talking about way, way back then, but right now, currently, where there's still the opportunity to do forgiveness work and develop that practice more fully. If you care to, just view the landscape of your life right now. Do a quick inventory. And see if you might see there are just one context in your life currently that you realize if you stop and reflect on it for a moment, you might say something like, hey, Jay, Mary, John, whoever, look here a minute. I'm a relationship in your life right now. And I'm a relationship in your life that needs some forgiveness work. be my marriage. It could be my relationship with my offspring. It could be my relationship of an offspring to my mother or father, if they're still with me. It could be my job. You ever think about the relationship you have with your job? Is there a work there, perhaps, that offers the opportunity to continue developing your practice of the skill of forgiveness? And not to be overlooked, because it probably is the most important of all, my relationship with myself. Can I look at areas in this relationship right here that need some forgiveness practice to continue to be done? Am I ready to let go of all hope that that particular part of my history will ever change? Well, that's it. The discovery of forgiveness. And I worked a bit on this precise language before calling Lisa on Friday to give her this title, Discovering, because it is that ongoing process. The discovering of forgiveness. It takes work and it takes practice. And God grant us